So Nataly, first of all, I want to say I never got a chance to thank you for the last time that I came to Chicago. I was very nervous the first time when I was speaking in the Logistics Leadership Conference, and when I saw you, it was like a bright shining light. And I remember I was extremely nervous, but you literally took my hand and you introduced me to everybody. And I think that you do a lot of good for our community. I think you do a lot of good for the trucking industry, and I really wanted to for other people to understand what it is that you do, how you do it, and to dig a little bit more deeper on what a day looks like in Nataly's shoes.
Sure, thank you so much for that, and of course, anytime. Well, we are a consulting firm. I'm a consultant. My job is to help the carriers in regards to safety, to help them connect with other companies that would be beneficial for their operation. We also do a lot of compliance audits, a lot of duty audits. We have a company that does the drug and alcohol testing nationwide, everywhere. So that's another thing that benefits our carriers. We work with you from start up until the point where you think you're big enough and now you want to sell your business and move on to something else.
So what does a day in a life look like for Nataly? I mean, I know that every time I call you, you're either in Florida or you're flying somewhere else and you're doing an audit here and an audit there. But what does a day in a life look like in your shoes?
It starts early in the morning with a phone call from a client. My day is usually about solving problems.
Okay.
Or representing carriers during compliance audits, and again, solving problems. I'm a problem solver.
So you guide them, or you guide these trucking companies when they're having compliance?
We do both. We have clients that do their safety fully with us, where we guide them on through their day-to-day operations, including safety. And then we have clients that hire us just for compliance audits.
Okay.
We also have clients that hire us for mock audits, which means I'm going to go into their business and do exactly what the FMCSA does, minus the penalties.
So you'll do an actual mock audit and score them on how they do,
Yes.
whether it's their logbooks, checks. I mean, you go through the whole thing.
Exactly.
Equipment,
and
safety.
Yes, and if there is a problem, whatever I find, we will work on a plan on how to improve your safety.
So your office is currently located where, in Illinois?
Yes, it's in Illinois, it's in Elk Grove Village.
Elk Grove Village. So in order to deal with an insurance audit, that could take a couple of days, no? Or am I
Yes.
mistaken? It could, okay.
It can take a couple of days, it can be done in 30 minutes, depends on how big your company is and how concerned the insurance is with your company.
So if an insurance company will send out an agent, and you will also fly there to meet that agent to do that?
Absolutely.
Okay, so it's a 2-3 day thing.
Yes.
Got it, okay. Well, I'm happy that I caught you here in Illinois at the same time that I'm here. Do you see an uptick in the amount of calls that you're getting recently?
Yes, I do. Lately, we're getting a lot of calls from all size type carriers in regards to compliance audits or focused reviews, which is kind of like a compliance audit, only it's focused on one or two things about your operation.
So give me an example of maybe the last one or two audits that you did. What were they actually looking into?
Well, today we had an audit for a bus company.
Okay.
It's a party bus company, and they were looking into the maintenance of the buses that they owned, which is something common. Bus companies are audited more often in regards to the compliance of their vehicles. We just finished another audit for a smaller box truck company, where again they were looking into the maintenance and into the hours of service. Lately, a lot of carriers have received a lot of violations in regards to maintenance, especially tires and lights. So I think the FMCSA and DOT are focusing a lot on maintenance nowadays. We have had a bunch of bad accidents, and they think they're due to maintenance.
Did they result in deaths? Is that why maybe they're cracking down on it? Did they result in like multi-vehicle crashes?
Yes,
or?
there was one not too long ago with a bus company and a few semis that resulted, I think it was 3 people died because of it. So I think right now they are trying to be more sufficient and to audit more carriers, especially based on their safety scores.
Got it. I keep reading about FMCSA and they're coming out with new rules, new regulations. Constantly, I'm reading about it. But I want to take maybe if you could take a couple of minutes. What do you see the biggest changes right now in the FMCSA that are going to impact carriers and particularly small carriers?
They are doing many different things. One of the things is about data queue challenges, how you challenge your violations. They are planning, or at least they're saying they're planning on hiring a third-party company to monitor those for them. What does this mean? Right now, when you as a carrier come to me and tell me I have these violations but I don't agree with it, I would go into the data queue and I would fight it. And the first person that responds to me is the officer that wrote it to you. And usually those officers don't really like to admit that they made a mistake, and sometimes mistakes happen. Mm-hmm. After that, if I don't agree with his decision, I would fight it again and I'll get a supervisor, and I'll fight it a third time and I'll get another supervisor. From what I understood is they're trying to avoid this and hire a third-party company to be responding to those requests, which might be very beneficial because then you don't have the personal factor.
Yeah, because admitting an error would be a lot easier for a third party to do versus the actual officer that wrote the ticket.
Of course. It's not necessarily a ticket, that's why I'm saying
or
violation.
Yeah, because a ticket you can actually fight, a violation you cannot fight.
Exactly. Well, you can fight a violation, but that has to be done through the data queue system, which a lot of the times carriers don't. And I want to say another thing, because a lot of drivers don't know this. Drivers can also fight those violations on their own, again, through the data queue system.
Oh wow, I actually didn't know that, but I hope my safety team knew that, but I didn't know that.
Well, you asked me earlier about drivers, and one of the things that drivers are lacking is training from the carriers about their rights as well. A lot of drivers that I noticed don't know what a PSP report is. They don't know one exists, which is their safety card score, kind of. And every time they get pulled over and they receive a violation, it goes onto that report. Just like to you as a carrier, driver has the exact same scoring system. And it's a good thing if the drivers feel that that violation was written in error, they should go and fight it, because that would stay with them for 3 years.
Okay. So what other changes would you say there that are coming to the FMCSA? In particular, I want to hear about companies having multiple MCs and companies having multiple fronts, I guess, where they're shifting assets around. I think that's a really important topic that we want to address in this interview.
Well, the first thing that I want to say is there is no law that says you cannot have multiple companies. Okay. As a matter of fact, I would say it's a good idea to have multiple companies as long as you're not doing it to evade prosecution, or you're not doing it because the FMCSA came in and gave you an unsatisfactory rating where you are supposed to cease operation. But let's say you are a carrier that does a lot of reefers and you are a carrier that does a lot of flatbeds. Okay. It would be a good idea to separate those two types of operation.
Okay, elaborate. Why? Like I have my assets all in ET transport, so I just want to know the thinking behind that. Why?
I will tell you why. For instance, if you have a lot of owner-operators and you have a lot of your company trucks. Owner-operators and company trucks should be separate. Because of your insurance, that is one thing. Because of the type of operation that you are doing, that one type impacts the other and vice versa. With reefers, for instance, you might get a lot of cargo claims. Okay. But if you have dry-vans, you don't have as many cargo claims. So why pay high insurance for both companies to be together when for the flatbeds you can pay less of insurance, for the reefers you can pay the higher insurance, and this way you know which company brings you how much in profits or how much you're losing. Okay. Plus you're separating your businesses. When an audit comes in and you're honest about it, again I'm saying this, there is no law that says you cannot have as many trucking companies as you like, as long as you have a legitimate reason for it. And as long as you don't lie about it.
Okay.
To go back to your question, the one thing that the FMCSA is saying that they will be changing is they will be eliminating the MC numbers, which is your motor carrier number.
Well, hold on. I want to go back one second before we get into that. I want to go back to the, how would you, so if I had multiple companies, how would I be booking the loads? So do I have multiple screens? Do I have multiple CRMs? Like, how would I be booking a load? One for a dry van load and one for a flatbed load. They would have different companies, different MC numbers, right?
Yes.
So how do you see the load booking process happening when you have one dispatch team with multiple companies?
Well, very, very easy. For the reefer company, you'll be booking loads under the reefer company. For the dry van company, you will be booking loads under the dry van company. You're not going to commingle and book loads under one and drive under the other. That's never a good idea.
Okay.
And it's also called double brokering, which you should not be doing.
Correct. I just feel like there's a lot of, additional. I mean, and it's tough enough as it is, but to have multiple, I would say, DAT accounts and email accounts and phone numbers are different, and you really need to. It'll give you a lot of other issues, I think, if you have everything separated or segregated.
I will give you an example. I have a 550 truck carrier who has 3 MCs and DOTs. One is for reefers, one is for dry vans, and the third one is for hazmat freight. They don't have a separate DAT or CRM or none of that, but they have made connections with the brokers where the brokers know them. They know under which company to put each load, knowing the type of operations that they do.
Got it.
Now, when you're a small company and you have 3 trucks, then this doesn't make sense. But when you grow, especially over 100 trucks, it makes sense to not put all your eggs in one basket.
Got it. Okay. We're going to get into insurance in just a bit, but you did touch on the FMCSA changing rules to the MC. What is that?
Okay, the MC is the motor carrier number.
Correct.
And the DOT, it's your Department of Transportation number. What they're saying that they're going to do is eliminate the motor carrier number. So for instance, let's say you had this company that didn't do very well safety-wise, and your insurance became very expensive, and you have decided to come to me and to purchase the company that I have. By regulation, right now, once you purchase somebody else's trucking company, you are required to get a brand new DOT number, but the motor carrier number would stay the same. So you will get the benefit of the history of the motor carrier number, meaning you will be able to work with brokers. Because if you opened a brand new company, to all the brokers and to all the insurance carriers, you'll be a brand new carrier.
Correct.
A lot of them would ask for you to have your MC for at least 8 months to a year before they can give you any freight.
Yeah.
So people would purchase trucking companies just because of that motor carrier number.
Do you see a lot of that happening?
I see some of that happening with smaller companies that are paying high insurance rates due to safety most of the time.
Got it. I'm meeting a lot of owners of trucking companies here in Chicago and the surrounding areas, and I have to say that one thing really bulges out, and that is their view and their outlook on safety. Why is it that a lot of the companies here, their focus is not safety, or why is it that they're running into so many problems when it comes to their safety scores? What is it that they're doing wrong?
Well, why they're not looking into safety is a question I have been asking for the past 12 years.
But it's not one company. We're talking about multiple companies that are, and they're not small companies. I mean, for us in Canada, I guess that maybe they're not small. Maybe here they're considered small. But when you're looking at a fleet that has 150, 200, 250 trucks, I mean, it's not easy to just switch your name and switch. When you can't get insured to change all that.
I agree. It's not easy even for 30 truck companies because nowadays everything is connected. Why people don't focus much on safety? It's because they were able to get away with it. Bad things don't happen every day. They happen once. And once they happen, this is when you learn your lesson. And I've met a lot of people that have learned their lessons the hard way, where they didn't start from the beginning on focusing on safety, because this is where it all begins. And sadly, this is where it all ends.
So have you seen companies not being able to get insurance?
Yes, I've seen many.
And what do?
They go into something that we have here in the United States called the state pool, which is where you go when nobody else wants to insure you, but this is an expensive insurance that has rules that you are to follow, which kind of stops your ability from hiring whomever driver you want to hire.
Got it. So it's more of a program like that is zeroed in on you, and more regulations are there on what you can and cannot do. Got it. Okay. What would you do differently with the FMCSA? I mean, what do you see where they can improve or that they can do? I mean, you obviously are in touch with a ton of carriers.
Well, it's not a perfect system. It definitely needs a lot of improvement. At the same time, everything into our laws and regulations happens very, very slowly. What I would improve is I would have the person that is doing the regulation go inside a truck and stay there for a week. Actually feel how those truckers are feeling, because it's very easy to sit behind a desk and to say this should have happened. Well, yes and no. We don't live in a perfect world. There is traffic. There are things that are beyond what we can predict. So maybe our regulators need to actually go behind the steering wheel of a truck and see how it feels from the other side, and kind of get into the life of a trucker to understand their struggles and to understand what is it that they really need. Because right now we have a huge shortage on parking, and everybody knows that, but we still have our regulations and our personal conveyance that is left to the interpretation of the officer.
Got it. So you would probably, I would say, probably have more leniency for personal conveyance?
Absolutely.
I want to move on to another topic. I receive a lot of driver complaints, and obviously they talk a lot about things that people do at other companies, and the fact that some drivers are getting either forced or they feel like they're being forced to manipulate logs as per the company's request. I just want to touch on what happens in a safety audit. Can you walk us through it, but especially when it comes to unassigned driving? Just a little recap. I'm sure you know this, that driver doesn't have enough hours, or they'll put another driver in there, or they will just unplug their ELDs and then all of a sudden wake up 200 miles further away. But any ELD provider, I mean, we would get automatically an email saying that there's X amount of drivers unassigned, and then they would have to have the safety manager's signature on it, and he would have to report on what happened to these 200 miles or who drove. So what happens on the audit side of this? I mean, is somebody checking all this?
Yes. Once you have an audit, you have to upload your logs. That's not a PDF file. It's an actual web file that goes into a system that it's called eRods.
Okay.
eRods is the system used by the FMCSA and Department of Transportation to check your logs. And under eRods, you can see all the unassigned driving. You can see every time there has been an odometer jump, every time there's something shady that has been going on with this truck. And they can also see every single co-driver that you have had written for that particular day or month that they are checking. So the worst thing that you can do is have one driver hop in California, then another driver hop in Kansas, and a third driver hop in Texas.
So you're aware these things happen, right? It's no secret. Okay.
It's no secret. And when you unplug an ELD, they can see that as well. They can see that it has been unplugged. They can see all the malfunctions. Now, sometimes things do happen. Like lately, we're having a lot of complaints about a very large ELD company where the driver can see his log, but the office cannot. And they kind of disappear. We've been talking to them, and what they explain to us is once a driver loses internet connection, sometimes things like that happen. They need to stop, they need to reboot and redo the whole thing, and then that problem wouldn't persist. But what I see lately is drivers are losing internet connection a lot.
Correct.
So we might be having some sort of problem with the servers,
Okay.
under my assumption.
But going back to the audit, so when an officer is looking at these ELDs and he finds that somebody's plugging, unplugging, truck is waking up in a different location, what happens?
Well, here is what happens.
I mean, more on the company side and then the driver's side, because I think they both get penalized, right?
Well, here is what happens. First, in the beginning of the audit, you are required to give your driver list.
Correct.
And with that driver list, you give their CDLs, their phone numbers, their email addresses. So let's say the auditor sees that different drivers are hopping in, one in California, another one in Kansas. Then the driver is single, then he gets another driver, he picks him up from truck stops, things happen. What that officer is going to do, he's going to call each one of those drivers and ask them if at any point of time they have had a co-driver. And let's say they say, yes, I did, because they knew of what's going on. They'll ask him about the name of that particular co-driver that particular day.
But 1 second, hold on. I can't remember what I did yesterday, let alone what I did 3-4 months ago, or who was my co-driver back then.
When you spend that much time in a truck with somebody, you will remember their name.
Okay. So he would call one by one and he would ask them if you ever had a co-driver. So let's say the driver knows who his co-driver was and he would say the name. Or in most cases, he probably wouldn't know.
Well, if he knows and he says the name, they might move on unless it looks very, very shady. If he doesn't know, they'll start asking questions. They'll start digging more. They'll start asking for payroll records and things like that to kind of match the driver to the truck to the co-driver.
Okay.
And don't get me wrong, it's not all shady. Sometimes I've seen a lot of owner-operators who have their own trucks. They like to train their drivers for a week or two, and at that time, there are actually two drivers in the truck because they like to see how the driver drives. They want to make sure that he does proper PTIs and things like that. Now, when we go to companies that like to use what's called in the industry ghost drivers, a lot of the times they don't do it very smart. As I said, they have drivers hopping from different states that makes zero sense, or they use drivers that used to drive for that company sometimes. What they forget is that those drivers are probably working for another carrier right now, and they were pulled over on roadside inspections. And those roadside inspections can be viewed by the auditor. And the auditor can see that at this date and time, this driver was pulled over in California, where a day before he was in Texas with the company X that he is auditing right now.
Okay. So basically they know exactly where you were at what location through the scales, and then they start asking the questions around that. Okay. So black on white, officer catches a driver and the company falsifying. What happens next?
Well, it's up to the discretion of the officer. They have the right to decide if this is aggravated, if they're doing this all the time with every driver, and then they give them a lot higher penalties, and they might give him an unsatisfactory rating, depending on how the rest of the audit is going. Or they might decide not to penalize them to the max, but will still be monitoring that carrier. The FMCSA has to prove that this carrier did something illegal, and usually when they go all in full force to prove something like that is when something really bad has happened. When they come in for a compliance audit, they see it, they find it, they write it up, they penalize on it, but they give you a chance to improve. They monitor you, but they give you a chance to improve.
Can an officer ask you what dash cams you're using and ask you for the footage of the dash cam?
Yes, they can.
They can?
Yes, they can.
Oh, okay. So as a consultant, when you're doing these mock audits, how trained are your eyes to see the bullshit from the real thing?
A mile away.
Can you spot it right away?
Yes.
You can spot it right away?
Yes, we can. It's our job to know the industry. It's our job to see things that other people might not. And before I go into a mock audit, first I vet the carrier. Okay. We use the same resources or similar resources to the FMCSA to find out everything there is to find about this carrier. And of course that is confidential and it stays with us. But for me to be sufficient in what I do, I have to know more than what you are telling me.
Okay.
So that I can find every single problem. Sadly, carriers think that if they tell us less and we find less, it's good for them or it's going to be cheaper. No, it is not. We're like the doctor. If you have cancer, you cannot come and tell me you have a sore throat, because then the medicine I'm going to prescribe is going to be the wrong one, and nothing good is going to come out of it.
Got it. Okay. When you have a trucking company that is doing these things, what do you tell them?
Well, we tell them the truth. We tell them what's going to happen if the Department of Transportation finds out about it. We also tell them what's going to happen if there is an accident, or worse, if there is an accident with a fatality. Because you got to understand that it's not only the FMCSA. They should not be scared only of them. Once there is an injury or there is a fatality, then other things come to play, like lawyers that want to dig through your safety, that going to go with a fine comb and find everything that is wrong with it so that they can make more money for their clients. And if you have 200 drivers and you treated each one of them with a firm hand, and then you have one driver who is your friend, and you have decided to let them do whatever they want to do just because they're your friend, and they would never do anything, to jeopardize your company, that's the driver that they're going to find. And that is the one thing that is going to tip everything into favor of that lawyer.
Would you say that the DOT is ramping up on their audits right now?
Yes, they are.
How do you feel this? How do you know this?
Well, for the last month and a half, we have had so many calls for audits, and usually when they start, it's either only the small carriers, or only the mid-sized carriers, or only the big carriers. Right now, it's all size carriers, all different types of operations. Box trucks over the road, regional, local.
Would you say it's new entrants or everybody across the board? I mean, new entrants have their own little small...
New entrants, this is something that whether you like it or not, it will come. Mm-hmm. You have between 6 and 8 months before it comes, and they schedule you ahead of time. Usually you get an email or a phone call, but this is a necessary evil that will come. When it comes to compliance or focus review, those usually come when you have alerts, and usually when you have more than one alert. It's a little system that goes up and down with carriers that pop up with alerts, and those alerts stay there for 60 to 90 days and they don't move.
So you're talking about you mean alerts when a truck goes into a scale and the driver gets, falsifying logs, or the driver gets put out of service because the cord's on his tires there, or like these are the alerts that you're talking about. Yes. Those are the signs.
Yes, the SMS alerts.
Correct.
Which are on the Safer website. This is what they're looking at, and let's say you have 2 alerts. One is an unsafe driving and the other one is in maintenance. They will come in and they will do a focused audit only on that. Now, if they find a lot of things wrong with that, they might continue on to do a full compliance. Or they might stay with a focus audit and still give you a conditional safety rating.
So before we move on to the next topic, I just want to finalize this one. And I want you to maybe address the audience and more towards the truck drivers that are being forced to alter, edit their logs, and to do things that are illegal. What message would you have for them?
I would say that no one can force you to do anything that you don't want to do. And if you are the carrier that is asking you to falsify logs, or it's asking you to unplug, change that carrier. Because as they say, birds of feather flock together. So the drivers that are okay with doing that would go to carriers that do that, and the drivers that don't want to do that would go to carriers that actually care about their safety, that would train the driver to use every single tool that it has been given to them in order to be legal and compliant on the road and still make money and deliver the load.
So would you say that there are a lot of drivers that would need extra training on ELDs and what you can do, and they don't use those features, or they don't use the, personal conveyance or emergency, or there's.
We train a lot of drivers every day, and the one common thing that I find with all of them is that no carrier has ever trained them on how to use the sleeper berth provision or how to drive on recap. Especially the older drivers, and when I say older, I don't mean age, I mean that have been driving for a while before the ELDs. They're not used to using splits. They're not used to driving on recap, because back in the day, it was a paper logbook. And let's be real and fair, they write one paper today, throw it out, write another paper next day, and things went on like that. Nowadays, drivers need to be trained. And I understand that a lot of the drivers feel I have 15 years of experience, there is nothing new you can teach me. And then they come to our office, and at the end of that training, they thank us and tell us, I've learned something new. Because a lot of carriers do not take the time to train their drivers. They do not take the time to talk to their drivers, which is important. Communication is key, and it's key for any business, not just ours.
For sure. I want to steer you into a different direction and talking about, does it scare you at all the pace that a lot of trucking companies are growing at, and the effects of it on the safety and compliance? So I see a trend, and I see, for us, I guess it's been, probably slow, you would say, 18 years, and we're only just over 100 power units. But I see here in the US especially, also in Canada, that there are carriers that are, you see them in 2020, they have 40 power units, 2022, they have 90 power units, 2024, they have 350 power units. And I see a lot of that here in the U.S., especially in Illinois. Does that scare you from a safety standpoint?
Sometimes yes, sometimes no, depends on the carrier. There are carriers that the owners of the companies have a lot of experience in this industry and have been doing this for a long, long time. And when they grow smart.
Okay.
And then there are carriers that do not have that much experience, but they surround themselves with experienced people, and they also grow smart. And when I say smart, what I mean is they connect the dots right. They hire the right drivers, they hire the right dispatchers, they do the proper training. Now there are carriers that just purchase trucks. And in order for those trucks not to sit on the parking lot, they would hire any driver. They would not check their clearinghouses, or you would have drivers that have been forbidden in the clearinghouse 5-6 times, and that driver would still get hired from those carriers because those truck payments are very expensive. Now, that's the growth that scares me.
Doesn't that open a lot of liability for that trucking company? If God forbid that driver that failed 5 times, if he gets into an accident, you're getting dragged into that lawsuit no matter what.
Well, it does. I am far away from saying that people don't change, that mistakes don't happen. Sometimes they do. At the same time, there's got to be a point of enough is enough. Why did you hire this driver? He was prohibited 5 times. What stops him from being prohibited the 6th one? What stops him from using whatever he used the previous 5 times while driving your truck? It has to make sense. And again, I am not saying that people don't change. I'm not saying that mistakes don't happen, but you have to be smart about it. And you have to protect your asset. And your asset is your company. Because once you're dragged into a tremendous lawsuit, you might lose everything that you own, including your house.
Yeah, I think that is a very, very important part that people fail to understand, that you're not just going to lose your company, you also lose everything that you've done on the personal side, because they will hold you personally liable for the damage that driver caused.
Well, a lot of people think that I have an LLC, that LLC is going to help me, I am shielded, I'm protected. Yes and no, because you are not a multi-billion-dollar company that has 3 CEOs, 5 CFOs, and things like that. No, you are you. You are the one that is solely making the decisions for your own company. And on top of it, a lot of the carriers commingle assets, which pierce the corporate veil.
Two topics we have left to talk about. Number one, we'll save to the best, is driver's pay. But first I want to talk just a little bit about the economy. How many fleets have you seen that went out of business in the last, I would say, probably 9 months, which has been probably the worst?
To be honest, not many, and the ones that I've seen to go out of business are small fleets, and when I say small, like really small, 1 truck operation to 5 truck operation, things like that.
But I guess fleets with 100, 150 power units, 200 power units, you don't see them going under.
I don't see them going under. I see them filing for different chapters, trying to help themselves, but not really going under as closing doors.
I guess giving themselves time to restructure legally.
Exactly.
Okay. So the effects, though, your clients are feeling for sure the effects of, I guess, much lower freight rates, right? I mean, it's not like it was, I would say, a year or two ago, where it was literally like an auction for your truck and people would bid crazy money for it.
I agree. It's very different right now, and it's the survival of the fittest. At the same time, at least what I see from my clients, they made enough money to be able to survive this. And as we know, being in this business, you get the good years and then you get the bad years, and then you get the good years and then you get the bad years. It's nothing new, nothing that has never happened. Maybe right now it was a little bit longer. I am seeing that prices are picking up a little bit, things are changing a little bit for the better for the transportation industry. Mm-hmm. But as I said, it's been like that. I've been doing this for about almost 20 years, and we have had good times and bad times. And going forward, it will be the same thing.
A lot of cycles.
Exactly. It's never only good or only bad.
So what are the biggest mistakes that fleet owners make that takes them under in the bad times? Is it not saving for the bad times? Is it not putting enough aside?
Yes and no. During COVID, a lot of people saw the opportunity to make a lot of money as trucking companies, as carriers, and they tried to grow their company very, very fast. And a lot of people purchase a lot of very expensive trucks that they cannot pay right now. So this was probably the biggest mistake that carrier did, is purchasing those very, very expensive trucks that came in a year and a half later in a bad economy with low rates.
You're talking about the trucks that were $250,000, $275,000, $280,000. Okay.
Exactly, and I see a lot of those being repossessed right now or going back to the banks, and then I see them right back at the auction where you can buy them for $70,000, $80,000 or less.
Is the interest rates, the fact that it has come down, is it helping people now?
Yes and no.
Or is it a little too early to say?
I have spoken to several banks that we work with, and given the economy, those banks are refraining from giving any loans to trucking companies, especially for equipment purchase and things like that. So trucking companies are left mostly with the banks that are specific for the trucking industry, or the factoring companies that can give them money in advance, or the factoring companies that are banks as well.
Why is it that I don't see in the US, or maybe it's in Illinois, or most of the fleet owners that I talk to, why do I not see captives here? Why do I not see private insurance, self-insurance? I mean, I know ET Transport since 2017, 18, I mean, we've been in a captive, we're self-insured. I mean, you get into an accident, it comes out of your pocket. And obviously different levels of, insurance. Why don't I see that here in the US? Everybody's on an open traditional market.
Captive is not something that it's common for the smaller carriers. Captives are common for the large fleets.
When you say smaller carriers, what number is that to you? Because my numbers are completely different than your numbers in the US. Small for me is like, 10 to 25 would be small. But small for you, I think, is completely different.
Yes. Small to me for captive. Not small as a small company, but for captive. Anything that is under probably 600 trucks, it's small when it comes to captive.
600 trucks? Mm-hmm. Okay.
You gotta understand, Canada and America are very different. You have limited insurance companies in Canada, correct, and they're not competing for your business.
No, they're not.
Where US has hundreds, if not thousands, of different insurance carriers that are competing for those carriers in a way.
Yeah, but at the end of the day, the insurance companies are looking at your profit and loss, and if it's a loss, then your insurance is going up.
And that is true, but this is also how the captive works. And imagine you have 15 companies in one captive where 14 of them are the best carriers. They care about their safety and they do everything by the book. And you have this one carrier that in 1 month has 2 tremendous accidents just because he doesn't care about his safety and he hires anybody.
Well, we've had that in our captive, and I mean, it was a member that was there probably for 7 or 8 years, and he ran into one bad year. But I mean, history shows that, you know, he was just fine. I don't think that you would be able to get into the captive unless you know, safety and compliance was definitely on the forefront, and extremely important to the carrier. We were vetted at least for 2 years before we were able to enter into the captive. But I just don't see that. I mean, I see a ton of trucking companies, and I see a lot of them in the open market.
I've worked on creating a captive for a carrier of mine, and we've worked for almost a year and a half to be able to put all the pieces together. And at the end of the day, once we were done with everything and we found the company that is going to sign off on the captive and everything else, my carrier said, that's too expensive, here's my insurance quote, and it's a lot less.
A lot less, yeah. I mean, the one thing that we get with the captive is stability. So our rates don't fluctuate. It's 1% to 2%. You know, it's more probably with inflation. The way the inflation goes up, that's how our annual premiums go up, between 1% to 2% every year. Going into my next topic, and my last topic, is driver's pays. If I look at driver pays in the US, and the same thing in Canada, if I look at 2018 and 19, I look at driver pays, and driver pays are 65 cents per mile back then. And if I look at driver pays right now, approximately, long-haul truck drivers, I see them at 65 cents per mile right now. Why do you think that the driver pays are not going up?
They went up. During COVID, I saw driver pay at $1 per mile. Unfortunately, with the economy that we got, I see a lot of carriers actually lowering driver pay, and I see carriers, probably the lowest I've seen was 48, and the highest I've seen was 89. People are trying to stay afloat with the rates that are going on right now, high insurance prices, as we just talked about, high cost of compliance if you want, because, you know, with the LDs, you actually have to pay for the device, you have to pay for your cameras and everything else. I think this is one of the reasons that people are either lowering driver pay or keeping it the same.
What do you think would need to happen in order for driver pays to go up?
The economy would have to actually boost up and go up, and rates have to change. The way transportation is right now would have to change, because right now trucking companies do not make a lot of money. If not, they make enough to stay afloat.
Thank you very much.
You're welcome.
Nataly, I really appreciate your time. I really appreciate you coming out here. I do want to thank my friend over at Alville Trucking for allowing me to use the space here in Illinois, and I want to say a special thank you to you. And for that first impression, the first impression means a lot. And your first impression was, you know, definitely stood out.
Thank you.
When I first met you. And I really enjoyed my time with you, and I hope that you'll come out tomorrow.
You need to see those roadside inspections of yours.
It's clean, you won't see anything.